rolls are warm and the horse is well shod, and they wait for me there, sure as there is a God. Well, how do I know that this good place is real? Is it more than a good kind of feeling I feel? Is there really a place where the old cowboys go? Well, I say that there is. You ask how do I know? Well, I know that an airplane was once just a thought, or a ship on the ocean like the mighty dreadnought, a Sony TV or a Cadillac car. They're all made out of something that once was a star. It's the thinking about them that made them come true. It's thought that made me, it was thought that made you. And every old cowboy on back into time has thought of this place with music and rhyme. It's a place that is peaceful where coyotes wail and stirrup high grasses and light winds prevail, where the gentle spring rains to the seeds in the sod. And I know that it's real, sure as there is a God. Where the gentle spring rain stir the seeds in the sod. And I know that it's real, sure as there is a God. I know that it's real, sure as there is a God.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Rusty says he can do the national anthem on horseback because I'm sorry, this is going to be a tough day for me too. Jason Richards will be doing the national anthem on horseback, so please remove your covers for the national anthem. Thank you.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bomb bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Well, we pulled that one off, so you know how we're going to do the rest of the day. That's going to be a professional. If you've ever seen one right there, big hand for Jason Richards. That was an easy one to pull off. And our flag parade, representing all the rides and the Marine Corps. Thank you very much. I want to welcome you all here, and more importantly, thanking you for taking time. Please be seated if you have a seat. And just before we start, is it too loud or can you hear? We got a professional Mike Mulvihill up in the booth here. We're all good to go? Too loud?
Too loud.
If you're too right next to the speaker, if we got, it's what we have. So there we go. So I want to thank you for coming here. I know Amy and the family has spent a long time putting this together, and there was a lot of meetings for it, but just the fact that you showed up, you don't know how much it means to him, because Rusty was a very special person, and this just proves that. My name is Grant Williams, and I was honored when Amy called me up to be the master of ceremony for this. I do have a little experience of it. I've run it for the Portola empty saddle ceremony for many, many years, along with Rusty. And for those of you who don't know, because I just assume everybody did, but a lot of people were asking me about what an empty saddle ceremony is. For the various rides, Portola, Tortugas, Rancheros, any member that's passed away since the last ride, could be a very informal get-together, have a drink, raise their names, and tell some good stories, or it could be a little more formal. As Portola, we meet at the San Juan Capistrano Mission in the springtime, and there's a mass in the beginning, followed by an empty saddle ceremony. And if you haven't been to Mission San Juan, please go. There's a Portola Plaza with a beautiful broad statue with 240 names of Portola riders who have moved on, and Rusty will be added there in April. So I have been in charge of that, and it's unlike today, there's a lot of things going on, and then when I was just starting off, I wouldn't go to the mass because that quiet time in the morning was a way for me to go around and get my thoughts together. And sometimes I would be doing a mental death spiral, and Rusty would be sitting off to the side. Just my favorite music he played was just when he was just kind of noodling along, and it was just very soothing. And he'd say, "Hey Grant, come on over. I need to tell you an old Marine Corps story," because I was a Marine with him, and I was like, I can't do this. I got things to do. But I'd say, "Yes, sir," and we'd sit down, and he'd have these great stories, either about when he was old cowboy days, or and singing with the old pioneers. And I would get so engrossed in his story, I'd forget about everything, and he knew exactly what he was doing. He was just getting me out of my head, and he'd hit me on the knee and says, "Hey, you're going to do fine. Let's just go forth and do it." And so I had 12, 13 years of doing that, and we had a little bit of a dark Marine Corps joke going, because towards the end, Rusty, he always had health issues, and me being selfish, like, well, who's going to do my music for the empty saddle ceremony? So I'd call a couple weeks before, and Amy would answer, and I say, "Is Rusty there?" She said, "Yes," and I'd always answer with a question. I'd say, "Rusty?" And he said, "Yes, Grant, you're not going to ring the bell for me this year. I'm going to be singing," and every year it would get more and more that way. But I'm sad to say we will be ringing his bell this year. But he led a legacy, and today this is very special for me because I get to do a dedicated custom empty saddles just for Rusty, and we're going to have a lot of great speakers from different rides, and we have a great presentation for you. So with that being said, I'd like to bring up a family friend, Reverend Lynn, to start off with a prayer.
That was beautiful. Thank you very much. And I'm so happy to be here. And just look at all these beautiful friends and family. It's really wonderful. So let's right now join me in prayer and a moment of reflection. So we invite the loving power and presence of God to bring us the comfort we need, the grace we need. And that will give us perspective as we grow in our understanding of the truths of life. So may we know in our hearts that life truly is eternal, that love is immortal, and that which appears to our finite eyes as death is, in fact, the horizon of another existence. And we're all here now because of our love for Rusty. And today we celebrate his life, we celebrate his spirit, not only who he was, but what his life meant and will always mean. So grant that each of us may hold on to that shining moment of memories, so that we carry these memories in our hearts as a candle, as an eternal flame. So may the divine gifts of love, guidance, and strength be with us here today as we share together in the beauty and the simplicity of remembering, honoring, and celebrating our beloved Rusty. Amen. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Reverend Dr. Steve Gabrielson, who will be giving the eulogy. And Amy, thank you for preparing that. It's beautiful.
Rusty Richards said of himself, "I'm a cowboy who sings," and as such, he has led an amazing life. He was the baby in his family, born Vincent Richards, November 15th, 1933, to Ann and Isaac Richards. He was born just outside the St. Mary's Hospital in Long Beach in what had been Shorty Krause's horseshoeing shop, because St. Mary's was leveled 8 months earlier in a 6.4 earthquake known as the 1933 Long Beach earthquake. It was appropriate that Rusty was born in a horseshoeing shop, considering he was destined to be a guy who always wanted to be a cowboy. His folks had found Modjeska Canyon the year before he was born, and his mother fell in love with it as they drove through the olive grove. His parents soon bought land, even though the day they looked at it, there were 2 mountain lions resting in the branches of a tree, staring at them. Not deterred by this, they built a cozy cabin on the site, and the family spent a major part of their time here. Vincent and all his siblings, Isabel, Kathleen, and George, loved the canyon. Vincent's heart was always in Modjeska, so he stayed in that cabin as much as possible. When he heard that someone was building a horse ranch, that sounded great to him. He pedaled on down there about 2 miles on his tricycle, and he asked them for a job. He was 3 years old at the time. Nellie and Roy Jackson were quite taken with him and promised him they would hire him when he got older. He started breaking horses for the neighbors when he was just 10 to 12 years old, and he continued training horses for the rest of his life. He entered a talent show at age 12, and the announcer renamed him Rusty, and the name stuck. 10 years after his tricycle trip to ask for a job, the Jacksons in fact hired Rusty to work for them, helping them with their horses. He bunked in their bunks house, which had been the old Pleasant home. It was the house where the Pleasants moved after they sold their first home to Madame Helena Modjeska. This bunkhouse was in pretty rough shape, and Rusty later mused that he could actually look through the roof and see the stars. When he was 16, a neighbor, Art McDougall, asked his help in gathering some wild cattle he had down in Black Star Canyon, which is very rough country, covered with giant boulders and heavy brush. McDougall owned horses the size of draft horses, and he wanted to use them in the gather. McDougall had oiled all of his tack, saddles, bridles, etc. with 30-weight motor oil instead of saddle soap. So during this round trip, that motor oil got all over Rusty, his hands, his clothes, his face, mixed in with an abundant amount of dust raised up from the cattle as they were rounded up. So he was pretty much a dirty mess after camping out for 3 days. He was on his way home from this trip to get a shower, a change of clothes when he bumped into his friend, Johnny Horton. Horton had been looking for him, and when Rusty came rolling out of Black Star Canyon, Johnny flagged him down. Johnny was not yet famous, but he had a local TV show called The Singing Fisherman, and he was wanting his pal Rusty to ride with him up to Channel 13 TV studio in Hollywood because Johnny wanted company for the long ride. Rusty flatly refused because he was so dirty after 3 days. Johnny finally convinced him that no one would see him riding in the car, and he could hide out in the courtroom while Johnny was in the studio. So reluctantly, Rusty jumped in and he rode along. At the TV station, Rusty sat by a fountain in the courtyard and he waited. Then a door opened up and Johnny was waving to him. When he got to the door, Johnny said, "Rusty, I want you to meet Mr. Forbes. He's the station manager and he wants to hear you sing some of your cowboy songs." Rusty borrowed Johnny's guitar and he sang The Cattle Call. Mr. Forbes then asked him, "How many songs do you know?" And Rusty said, "I don't know, a couple hundred, I guess." Mr. Forbes said, "How would you like to have your own TV show?" And Rusty said, "That would be great. I'd like that a lot." So Mr. Forbes said, "Well, could you be ready to sing for 15 minutes at 7:30 this evening?" Rusty said, "No, I can't. I'm filthy dirty. I'm far from home. I don't have a place where I can change, and I don't have any clean clothes." Forbes said, "I don't want you to change a thing. I don't want you to even wash your face. I want you to do the show exactly as you look right now." So Rusty found some paper, and with a new watch he'd won in a talent show, he timed out each of his songs that he would sing on the TV show that night. Then he called his mom and everybody else he knew, and of course, to alert them he was going to be on TV. Just before the show started, he slipped into the men's room and combed his hair. They called him to his mark, and just as they started the countdown to camera time, a prop girl reached out and grabbed his hat off his head, messed his hair up, slapped his hat back on, and he was live. He did his first of many TV shows called Song Trails with Rusty Richards, and the show was an immediate hit. About a year later, the Korean War was heating up, and Rusty's big brother, George, was a Marine, and George was already in Korea. So just before his 17th birthday, Rusty enlisted in the Marine Corps on November 10th, 1950. With his parents' consent, he left TV to go to Korea, but he never made it to Korea, which is probably a stroke of luck. He was sent instead to a location which Rusty said was pronounced Yokosuka, Japan, where he was for two years, and during his off-duty time there he sang with an all-Japanese band. That stage singing experience, he said, really helped him when he later sang with the Sons of the Pioneers. After the Marines, Rusty rodeoed, riding bulls and broncs for a couple years until our late great pal Baxter Black often said his brains finally came in. But they must not have fully come in, as Rusty then joined the forestry as a firefighter. He was soon promoted to a driver since he knew the area so well. He was later promoted to foreman, and he experienced some really hair-raising adventures in this job that very nearly cost him his life. While he was working in the forestry on his off days, he teamed up with Cliff Rose, a stuntman versed in skydiving and wing walking. There were hundreds of Westerns on TV. You might remember that one time there were 26 primetime shows on TV at one time, Westerns. So Rusty taught Cliff how to ride, taught him how to do saddle falls from a horse and dynamite charges, and Cliff in turn taught Rusty how to parachute, skydive, and as Rusty said, we basically tried to kill each other for a couple years. They bumped into a tree topper named Hal Needham, and Hal loved the idea of stunt work and asked if he could join them. And together they produced stunts for a show called You Asked For It. It was on TV. Hal Needham was later a stunt double for Richard Boone on Have Gun Will Travel, subsequently wrote and directed Smokey and the Bandit, and became extremely famous in Hollywood. Rusty met Amy Fitzpatrick in Silverado Canyon. It was love at first sight. It was a lifetime love affair. They were married for 65 years. Rusty, Hal Needham, and Cliff Rose had rented a large home from stuntman Chuck Roberson, who was John Wayne's stunt double. When Rusty and Amy married in 1958, they moved in the master bedroom of Chuck Roberson's house for about 6 months. Then they found a small cottage up in the canyon, in Latuna Canyon, where they lived when Jenny was born in 1959. While working in pictures, Rusty was a writing and shooting extra and a stuntman. And he got to know all the Western movie greats: John Wayne, Gary Cooper, Roy Rogers, Ronald Reagan, Ben Johnson, Casey Tibbs, Robert Mitchum, John Mitchum, Burt Reynolds, and many more. And to his great joy, Rusty got to be friends with many of them. Jason was born in 1961, and when the studios suddenly dropped 52 Westerns from TV at once in just one season, Rusty said it was time to leave the picture business. So the couple headed home with Jenny and baby Jason to live again in Majeska Canyon. They rented a 40-acre ranch just up the road from here, and it included the entire olive grove and more, and they later bought 10 acres of it where they built their present home. Rusty set up a horse training stable in the Majeska Ranch, and he trained horses for Burt Reynolds, Dinah Shore, and many others. He also had a regular horse shoeing route. Molly was born later that year in 1962. Their close friendship with Burt Reynolds continued, and Burt loved to bring his celebrity friends and girlfriends down to meet Rusty and Amy and the kids, and he made the Richards family pretend that they had no electricity. So they would turn all the lights off, hide the TV, light up a bunch of kerosene lanterns, and pretend that they didn't have electricity. Burt had been so enchanted with the fact that they had lived without electricity in Latuna Canyon, and he wanted all his Hollywood friends to experience what that was like. Rusty was hired as a trainer at the Capistrano Saddleback Club. After about 18 months, he decided to give the picture business one more try. So, aided by Burt Reynolds, he auditioned for the second lead in a show called High Button Shoes, and he got the part. But fate intervened with a call from a friend. The Sons of the Pioneers were looking for a tenor, and his friend had already recommended Rusty. After waiting 3 days for a call from the group, Amy urged Rusty to call his friend, Ken Curtis, who had previously been a lead singer with the group for about 3 years. As a side note, Ken Curtis at that time had just made his second appearance on Gunsmoke as Festus Hagen the month before Rusty called him, and Festus went on to play that role in 304 episodes. Rusty finally reluctantly called his friend Ken, who immediately told him to hang up. Hey, I can get you in. So pretty soon, Lloyd Perryman from the Sons of the Pioneers, one of the original members, called up Rusty. An audition was set up, and 2 days later, the day after Thanksgiving, 1963, Rusty Richards was the newest member of the Sons of the Pioneers. Rusty was worried that his friend Burt might be disappointed in his turning down the high button shoes that Burt had helped him land. But Burt said, hey, let's go get a drink, have dinner, and celebrate. This is great news. This time period was probably the highlight of Rusty's life, as he loved the music and loved singing harmony with the group. It was a great joy to be a member of the Sons of the Pioneers. He loved performing for audiences of 40,000 or more fans at a time, plus lots of TV appearances, and he got to meet 5 presidents of the United States and have his picture taken with 3 of them. He got to travel the world and was very thrilled to do this. His biggest regret at the time was all the time he had to be away from Amy and the children that he loved so much. Rusty toured the world, but always claimed that Majeska Canyon was paradise. A year after joining the Pioneers, Rusty and Amy were blessed with the birth of Amy Jo in 1964, but just 18 months later, in December of 1965, a tragedy struck when they lost baby. Little Matthew only lived for 2 days, passing away on Christmas Eve, 1964. Another life-changing event happened about 58 years ago when Rusty got a call from a fellow inviting him to go on the Portola ride to sing for a great group of guys. Their send-off party was at the El Adobe restaurant, and there was a lot of horseplay and hijinks going on the patio. Rusty and Amy didn't know anybody, and Rusty leaned over to Amy and said, I don't think this is going to be my scene. But Amy told him, hey, you didn't think you'd like playing with the circus either, but you loved it. You got to know all those animal trainers, and you got to ride the elephants. You never know, you might love this one too. And true to form, Rusty loved the Portola and all the men he met there, and later on the other rides, Los Caballeros, Rancheros, Tortugas, and Whidbey Island. He said many times, that is really like a brotherhood. He sang on these rides for well over 50 years, and he started doing horse training demonstrations on many of the rides. Rusty had a serious health problem in 1990. He had to have open heart surgery and a 5-way bypass, but the insurance company said, we're not going to cover the operation. It's a pre-existing condition. So Rusty got help from his friends from the Rancho Mission Viejo, Tony Moiso, Gilly Geary, and the Portola Riders. Some of the other trail ride groups also helped, and Rusty battled his way back to full health an activity continuing to train horses, ride horses, break horses, team rope, sing, and write his beautiful songs, poetry, and books for another 33 years. His friendship with Casey Tibbs was renewed on a Portola ride, and it deepened so that when Casey heard that Rusty and Amy were going to be driving through South Dakota on a Pioneer gig, he flatly insisted that they must go visit his family home in Fort Pierre. While visiting Casey's family, Rusty asked if they could see where Casey was raised. Their visit to what is known as the old home place, with its sod roof and remote location, was pivotal in causing both Rusty and Amy to recognize that Casey Tibbs' incredible story had to be written. They both agreed a cowboy should write it because only a cowboy could understand that lifestyle. Amy suggested that Rusty should write it because he had writing skills, but Rusty at the time thought not. He was very reluctant, but as it turned out, Amy was right. Rusty's book, Casey Tibbs, Born to Ride, was award-winning and was #1 on Amazon in the category of sports biography for over 3 years. Rusty also did finish his own autobiography, and Amy promises that she will get it published, so stay tuned for that. Tragedy again struck the Richards family in 2005. A rare and fast-growing cancer struck down their beloved daughter and songbird, Jenny Richards Woodward, and the whole family suffered from the loss. Amy and Rusty were devastated, but vowed to carry on and enjoy life. After leaving the Sons of the Pioneers, Rusty recorded his American Cowboy album, voted to be in the top 25 Western albums of all time. Please always remember to saddle up, men, and go riding. Rusty started roping and won many buckles, including 5 Ben Johnson championship buckles and the last Ben Johnson saddle. A serious roping accident in 2003 broke both of Rusty's shoulders, which ended his roping days. His concerts with his son Jason were always sold out, and singing with Jason was a great source of joy and pride. In fact, singing harmony with all of his kids, Jenny, Jason, Amy Jo, and occasionally Molly, was a source of joy to him. Many of his kids and grandkids sing, write, and perform, and that made him very proud. While not successful in school, likely caused by undiagnosed form of ADD, Rusty was a lifelong student, continuously reading nonfiction of every type. He loved to learn, and he spent 16 years attending lectures by Andrew J. Galambos, an astrophysicist at the Free Enterprise Institute. Rusty won many awards in his cowboy life and his singing life, and you can see a banner depicting most of them right over here. His greatest joy and pride was the Chester A. Reynolds Award from the National Western Heritage Museum and Cowboy Hall of Fame in Oklahoma in 2016. Rusty loved his family, his wife Amy, his kids, Jenny, Jason, Molly, Amy Jo, and Matthew, his grandkids, Autumn, Amanda, Melody, Logan, Becky, Ann, Tenor, and April, and great-grandkids, Jana, Gavin, Oliver, Hannah, Colt, and Isles, and they all adored him too. He was also very close to his own siblings, Isabel, Kathleen, and George. He also loved his friends, vowing to try to always say yes whenever they asked him to do something. He tried very hard to keep that vow. He always stated, to have a friend, to be a friend, you must have a friend, and here's what he said. To have a friend, you have to be a friend. Got it? To that point, he was training a horse for a friend right here in this arena 2 weeks before he passed away. I've read that the average size of a crowd memorial for an 80-year-old, because they've lost most of their friends, is 19 or 20, 10 to 40 people. By the look of this crowd, at 90 years old, I'd say that Rusty succeeded in being a friend. Thank you for coming to wish a happy heavenly birthday and Vaya con Dios to Rusty Richards, a man who called himself a cowboy who sings.
Thank you, Reverend Steve. We're going to go on to the next Amy, you're in charge. Callie Richards, please stand up. There we go. You are not forgotten, Callie. You get your own standing ovation. I'm going to use this opportunity because we've not had any issues, so the flag bearers have done an outstanding job. I'm going to have them exit while we are still good. I'd like to point out the empty saddle, physical empty saddle we have here with Mr. Jerry Tyndall. This is Little Champ, which is Rusty's horse. From the stories that I've gotten, this is a Maserati horse, a typical somebody who gets a car that they really can't handle. And he got this kind of later in life when he was not able to ride him as well as he wanted, but this is one of his favorite horses here, so just want to know this is Rusty's horse, and Jerry Tyndall here is going to remain in this arena with us. Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to bring up, as was talked about, Rusty was on many, many rides. And if you try and go on one ride, you're going to get invited on another ride, then another ride, and then your wife says no. So I've been on 3 of them. There's a couple I never, unfortunately, was able to get up to, the Whidbey Island one. My father did. So we're going to bring a representative from each ride to give a little color of how Rusty made an impact on each one of those rides. So to start off, I'd like to bring up Tony Moiso, who's going to represent El Viaje de Portola.
All right, gang. Amy, please know that I'm honored to represent El Viaje de Portola, Rancho Mission Viejo, and the entire ranch family, and Melinda and myself. I've just got a few thoughts. The first one is, when God put us in Rusty Richards' life, he blessed us. All of us. All of us. So today, we're going to ask God to bless Rusty Richards. And when I count 3, I want all of us to blast out, God bless Rusty Richards. Are you ready? I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. All right. 1, 2, 3. God bless Rusty Richards. Okay. As you heard, Rusty came on our ride in 1967. I never heard that part about that. He looked around at El Adobe and said, geez, this isn't for me. Okay. The first day I was on that ride the year before, I looked around and I said, I've never met people like this. I'm never coming back. Okay. This would have been our 60th year. So Rusty rode the Portola Trail all those years. In 2004, I think it was, we dedicate the ride each year. We dedicated the ride to Rusty Richards. And we built in the Campo Portola, which is the permanent campsite, the Rusty Spur Saloon, which is now the unofficial headquarters of those of us who no longer ride. It happens to you, gang. You can get on with a ladder, but getting off's the hard part. Rusty and Buck Bean. Many of you remember Bucker Bean. Rusty and Bucker Bean and a few others were truly the heart and soul of our Orange County El Viaje de Portola ride. Why? First of all, they set a standard for people being able to sit by the fire and sing in the early evening, after 10, after midnight. And when you'd wake up to go to the bathroom at about 2 o'clock in the morning, you'd still hear them singing. So Bucker Bean and Rusty were really the heart and soul, the spirit of our horseback ride for all the years. Rusty wrote our alma mater, or our, what would you call it? Our anthem. Our anthem. Saddle up, men, and go riding. The song goes, saddle up. I'm not going to sing it, promise. Saddle up, men, and go riding. Saddle up, men, and go riding the foothills of old California. Saddle up, men, and go riding El Viaje de Gaspar Portola. And every year, from those days at El Adobe, from the days when we would leave Bomber Canyon on the Irvine Ranch, until even these past many years where we leave our Amatis camp, when the riders ride out, the tradition has been, and it's a great moment in sports, Rusty would sing Saddle Up Men and Go Riding to set the tone for our weekend. You've heard that Rusty was a cowboy, and that great line that he was a cowboy who could sing. Okay, there's a difference between a cowboy and a horseman. There's a huge difference. And we had a great friend who's there in heaven with Rusty. His name was Jimbo Wales. And he said there's a difference between a cowboy and a horseman. And when you need a cowboy, don't ever call a horseman. A lot of us can wear these costumes. A lot of us can ride. But very few ever earn the accolade of being a cowboy. And Rusty Richards was a real cowboy, as we all know. So, I mentioned the Sons of the Pioneers, and we all know about it. 41 years ago, we had a celebration at the ranch. It was the 100th birthday of Rancho Mission Viejo, 41 years ago. And we had a rodeo, and we had all kinds of cowboy stuff. But the highlight was Rusty put together a group of the old-time Sons of the Pioneers and brought them, and they really set the stage for that party. I see Joe Cannon here, and our other entertainer that day, 41 years ago, was Joe Cannon. And we saved a lot of money because Rusty didn't want to be paid, and Joe Cannon doesn't deserve to be paid. Okay, so enough from me. I apologize, Joe. I try to...
Sure, I understand.
All right. So a little prayer here at the end, please. We've already heard about the Marine Corps, so I don't need to go into that. As has been the tradition when I'm blessed to be able to give these talks, we say to Rusty, vaya con Dios, nuestro gran amigo, Rusty. When you get to heaven, please say hello to all of our pals who are already there, especially to Gordon Reinhardt, to Bucker Bean, and to the man I mentioned, Jimbo Wales. Please tell them to keep the beer cold because we'll all be along in a little while. And so in conclusion, God bless Rusty Richards. Ride on, Rusty. Ride on forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I'd like to bring up Hook McCullough, who will be representing the Rancheros Visitores ride.
My delivery in honor of Rusty was going to be a little longer, but thanks to the Father, he took up like 90% of what I was going to bring up. I will say one of the things that Rusty did that was not brought up was that when Roy Rogers passed away and was going down into the ground, he sang Peace in the Valley with Dale standing there with him. One of the I had a chance to meet Rusty in 1979 when I was a Maverick on Rancheros, And so I spent a lot of time with him. And as the years went along, that's where you went for the night entertainment. And Rusty was always during breaks, we'd sit down and talk, and how much he loved his daughters. And one of his mutual friends wrote a poem called The Dance, which I told him brought him to tears. And he goes, I really like that. So I'm going to give it to the daughters. I danced with another woman tonight. My wife didn't seem to mind. We took to the floor like a pair of swans at fate, forever entwined. Leaving our wake through the dancers that flowed like notes in search of a song, we tested our two-step, tried out the waltz, and laughed when something went wrong. I led, she followed, trusting each step, spurred by the beat of the band. Like birds taking wing the very first time, it helps to hold someone's hand. Although I had known this woman before, I thought of her as a child, but there on the dance floor, arm around her waist, I found my heart was beguiled. For her, a window had opened. I was there. I'm eternally glad. For the rest of my life, I'll remember the first night she danced with her dad. Since most of you have heard Rusty's life, the integrity and what he gave back, I'm going to make mine short. I'm going to give you a poem that was written by a guy named Jim Swanson. It's called The Dash. I'm going to have a hard time getting through this, so.
Smile and look at the sky when you need to.
Yeah. No kidding. I know a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He spoke to the dates on his picture, the beginning to the end. He noted the first came the date of his birth and spoke of the last date with tears. He said what mattered most of all was the dash between the years. For the dash represents the entire time he spent alive on earth. And now only those who loved him know what that line is worth. For it matters not how much you own, the house, the barn, the cash. What matters most is how we live and how we spend our dash. So think, my friends, think long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left. You may not be at dashes and range. Just slow down enough to think of what is true and real. Try real hard to understand how other people feel. So slow to anger, try to show appreciation more, and love your neighbor and your friends as you never have before. Treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile. Remember that your special dash will only last a while. So when your empty saddle is read with your life to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say and how you spent your dash? So, Rusty did it right. He was a dear friend. God bless you, Rusty.
Thank you, Hope. I'd like to bring up Jim Verbeerst from the Tortuga Ride.
Unfortunately, I didn't have the opportunity of knowing Rusty for as long as some of the other gentlemen. But in the time that I did know Rusty, he became a close friend. And I think it's fitting this celebration be held on Veterans Day. Rusty was a Marine and a patriot. I'd like to give a shout out for all the veterans in attendance today. Thank you for your service to our great country that I know Rusty loved. Rusty was a gentleman who cared for people. He always had a friendly smile when he greeted you. Rusty was an intent listener to what you had to say. and showed true interest when speaking to you. He was a friend to all. I thought of the times I spent with Rusty on various club rides and get-togethers. I loved listening to his music and the stories he told. He would always capture my attention with the tales about horses, which he was so knowledgeable about. I was truly in awe of his talents and many life experiences. While thinking, I decided to jot down all that I heard that he did. Most importantly, he was a wonderful husband and father, a Marine, a musician, a singer, a songwriter, a bronc rider, a stuntman, an actor, a poet, a storyteller, and a horse whisperer. I know I have probably left out a few. Many folks aspire to be good at one or two things during their lifetime. Rusty excelled at all of them. An amazing, accomplished man, a man dedicated to whatever he did. One of a kind. A great man and my friend. He'll be missed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I'd like to bring up Doug Moeller, who's representing the Whidbey Island Ride, MRC.
I stand here representing the cowboys from the MRC ride, Whidbey Island. Many of them are here. And also representing the 150 or 200 riders from the last 30 years or so, all of whom called Rusty a friend, and all of whom Rusty called a friend because he never met anyone that I know of who was not a friend of his. We were blessed to have him on our ride, and it kind of happened by accident because one of the John Diller, who was a Portola rider, moved up to the Northwest, and he saw what we were doing at our ranch, called Rusty and said, "You need to come up and see what we're about." So he did. And he found out that we do more than host a ride at our ranch for 4 days every year. For the rest of the days of the summer, we host 1,000 kids or so, put them on a horse for the first time. We have Down syndrome kids ride their child center, but kids all deserving who really need a day away from some of the bad things that's going on for them. Anyway, Rusty saw what we were doing, and that, in fact, is the reason that he kept coming back. He enjoyed the ride, he enjoyed the people, but he really enjoyed our mission, and our mission was to help kids. Now, not only did he sing around the campfire, and everybody's talked about that, he was a trainer, a great horse trainer. He was a horse whisperer. Nothing surprised our new riders more than when Rusty would get into an arena with maybe a green broke colt or whatever, and in an hour he'd have that horse following him around like a puppy, practically begging him to get on his back. That was Rusty. He was just a terrific guy. He's practically the only real cowboy, in fact, that we have ever had on that ride. Stands for MRC Ranch, actually stands for Metropolitan Cowboy, and none of us really say we're anything more than that. We every year have our own celebration of life for the riders who have passed, our own Enramada. So this year, on a really nice day in July, we will say his name and we'll ring the bell. Rusty Riches, vaya con Dios, my friend.
Thank you, Doug. Last but definitely not least, I'm saving for last because I'm bringing up Mike Schmitt, who's the president of Los Caballeros, because this wouldn't have been put together without Los Caballeros because they've got all the labor here. Mike has been, I'm the pretty face up here that's talking, but Mike's the foreman that's actually been here making this happen in all the meetings. And most importantly, he was at Costco waiting for the 300 to 400 pounds of meat that he cooked starting at 6:30. So he's been running this whole deal for Amy. And so I'd like to bring up Mike as the president of Los Caballeros to honor Richard. Jason.
And Grant sponsored me onto the Portola ride in 2011, and what I love about this community, and it really is a community, that we have so many crossing circles, and Rusty helped thread that together pretty nicely. This last year has been tough on Rusty, right? He's been in and out of hospitals, and he's been fighting long COVID, and he's been doing these things, and we were blessed. Me and Jeff Skelton and Trey Mitchell were blessed to be here with our horses, and Trey would call Rusty up when we were bringing in the new Arab or doing something and say, "Hey, Rusty, we're going to be down at the round pen if you want to come by." And so he'd go, "I don't know if I can." And he'd drive into this parking lot and he'd say, "Amy says I can only be here about 10 minutes. And okay. So, but what are you doing?" And so we'd start working the horses, and he'd sit on the tailgate of the truck and kind of give us some coaching from the side. And after about 15 minutes, he goes, "Well, here, let me just have that lead rope for a minute, and let me just show you what I'm talking about." And 2.5, 3 hours later, we'd be getting a phone call. Trey'd be getting a phone call from Amy saying, how's Rusty? And Rusty's like, well, and as he's walking back over to the truck, because he's been just standing up working the horse the last couple hours, he had so much more energy and vitality and energy, and he loved men, he loved people, he loved horses. He always walked away from these events, even if he'd just been out of the hospital a couple of days, and he always walked away with a little bit more energy. And so Amy and Molly and Amy Jo and Jason, everybody, thank you for sharing him with us. All of us really appreciate you guys. And I also wanted to thank Tony Moiso, the Rancho Mission Viejo and the Portola, for helping us put this whole thing together. And it's always a pleasure working with Grant. And thank you all for coming out and celebrating Rusty today. We all appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. We're winding this down. I know it's hot out there, but I'd like to bring up Reverend Lynn for the final ceremony, or the sermon, and then Donal Burke will give a closing prayer after that.
I want to make sure that I have this right in front of my face here. Can you help me there? Okay, thank you. And those were touching tributes. They were amazing. And, everyone will be given a chance to share. I want to mention this, our treasured moments with Rusty during the musicians' breaks. So that will come after the service. So just know you'll get a chance to do that. I know you can feel this consciousness of love today. I think we've heard it, we see it, we feel it, and that love honors the life of Rusty Richards. We know love never dies, nor does it really ever leave us. And Rusty's spirit has touched each one of us in such a special way, and we are richer for it. Now, I know we have a personal sense of loss from his passing, but we know for him that there is a new beginning. Every spiritual teacher has told us that life is eternal. What is real about us is our soul, our spirit, not our bodies. Jesus said, "Let not your heart be troubled. In my Father's house there are many mansions. If not, I would have told you. I will go prepare a place for you, and if I go prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you. That where I am, there you may be." So there are many mansions, there are many realms for this eternal life. And as we complete our time in one place, we move on to the next, knowing it has been prepared for us, and we've been prepared for it. So just as we bring into this life this wonderful potential to grow and be productive, when we also die to this life and move on to the next realm, we carry with us the love and the goodness we have experienced. So if we see the whole event, we can feel not only sadness, but joy, for we realize that with this departure, there is a new beginning. So today we've had an opportunity to embrace the eternality of life, and knowing that Rusty lives and has his being in each one of us and all those lives he has touched. Indeed, his legacy will live on through each one of us, and his legacy will always be remembered. Amen. Thank you. And I'd like to invite Father Donal to come forward, please.
Thank you, Reverend Lynn. We had already worked this out, but I can't bring him up without a little introduction because he just can't walk up here without understanding, because I know you have a lot of questions. So there are a lot of hijinks on the rides. It doesn't matter, pick any of them. He's on all of them. Is a Capuchin monk, and they are very old tradition. But he gets cut loose a little bit on our rides. And as Tony was saying, you go to sleep and there's people singing still. Father Donal is one of those individuals that's still out there till 2 o'clock in the morning, and actually giving people good counsel as well, but also dragging them down a couple holes there. But on Sunday, he provides a service, and if you're Catholic or not, he's going to convince you to be there, and you will be there on that Sunday morning. So he is a dear friend to all the ride and a very colorful character. So if you see him at the lunch, please go up and introduce yourself. And I'd like to introduce Father Donal Burke too.
It is my great joy to be here with you today. When I walked in here today, so many of you asked me, why am I wearing my fancy dress? Well, today I'm dressed, this is me in drag. The truth is, yes, I am a friar, I am a Franciscan, but I've got even more better news today. It is always my joy to be with all the Ranchero brothers and the Portola guys. Look at all those men around here in hats today. You know what I'm talking about. When we get together, yes, we party, we have good fun, we celebrate, and every now and again we may have a little libation. But the good news behind all of that, we are brothers. We are blessed to be wonderful brothers who wear hats. And we have a brotherhood and a friendship and a family that is second to none. Amy, every year you know where Rusty was. Sometimes you didn't know where he was. But the truth is, Rusty had your wonderful family at home, but he had so many other beautiful families all over the country, many of them cowboys. So many of us were blessed to know him. We were truly, truly blessed. He enriched us. But as I stand here before you today, I'm reminded of the words Pope Francis said the first day he was made a pope about 10 years ago. He stood up on the balcony of St. Peter's, opened up his arms, and there was about 500,000 people there. And then he said, when it got quiet, he said, brothers and sisters, will you please pray for me? And then the whole place went very, very quiet. And the 500,000 people stood and prayed. And then his very first words he said to those present and to a worldwide audience, he said, my brothers and sisters, joy is the infallible sign of the existence of God. Joy is the infallible sign of the existence of God. Brothers and sisters, I submit to you that Rusty brought so much joy to so many men and women and cowboys all over this land. And my prayer for him today is that now that he's gone home to be with his Maker, that he will know the joy of living in the presence of God the Father, Jesus the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So let's bow our heads and pray. Eternal God, We've come here today to say farewell to Rusty. You have known him from the day he was born. Now that he's gone home, may he rest in peace with you. Lord, bless all those he's left behind, especially Amy, his children and grandchildren, and so many of his wonderful friends. Give them peace, Lord, and bless all those gathered here today who knew him and loved him. Give them peace. And Lord, welcome him into paradise. Send out the angels and saints to greet him, and may he live in your presence today and forever. And may the Lord bless all of you today, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Go and celebrate the life of Rusty Richards.
As a closing tribute, I have a good friend of mine that I wanted to do taps. Rusty was a Marine. It was a Marine Corps birthday yesterday. It's Veterans Day today. I just don't like doing a recorded version of it. And then my friend Myron says, well, I play the bugle. I do this all the time. Of course he does. Why wouldn't he have a bugle in his car that he can play on call in front of everybody at the last minute? So I'm joking, but I'd like to make this a little, we're going to have Myron kick off, and Jerry will escort Rusty's horse out. So everybody please stand, remove your covers, and Myron, the floor is yours. Rusty Richards!